Okay, Heather, I'm gonna let you take it. I'm Meredith. Which one of you is gonna do it?
Okay. All right, thanks, Pam. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I hope everybody can hear us okay. Welcome to the breakout session on the North Carolina experience with MDTs. I'm really excited to be helping to moderate this session. I don't know, hopefully some of you were able to join the conference warm-up session we had on Tuesday. Was that Tuesday? Tuesday afternoon, where we did a little bit of an intro generally about MDTs, but the great part about this session is we're going to hear from the people that are doing this work in North Carolina. And I'm really excited about this group. They are the Guilford County MDT. And I'm going to turn it over to Heather Magill, who's the Elder Justice Coordinator with the Family Justice Center in North Carolina and serves as one of the coordinators for the Guilford County MDT. We're really going to be talking a lot today about where they've been, challenges they've hit, and where they're going. And I hope that this will be a pretty informal conversation. We talked about in our planning that we really wanted people to participate. So feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions or put a question in the chat box. I'll be monitoring the chat box throughout, and we'll interject when it makes sense with the questions, but just know I'll be keeping an eye on it. And I'll turn it over to Heather. I think we're gonna have our panelists go through introductions as well, and then jump into the content. So thanks everybody for being here, and Heather, take it away.
All right, I'll start. I'll just, quickly, I know Meredith just introduced me, but Heather Magill with the Guilford County Family Justice Center. I'm the Elder Justice Specialist Coordinator here. And before we dive in, I just want to introduce the other panelists. Guilford County is unique where we have 2 cities in one county. And so our multidisciplinary team covers the entire county. So we do pull in from both cities. And prior to COVID hitting, we tried to rotate between Greensboro and High Point so that we could have meetings in both cities. And historically, we've had a lot of involvement out of Greensboro. Just the Family Justice Center first opened in Greensboro, and I think it's important to highlight both cities. And so today, we have the majority of representation out of High Point. And I just kind of want to talk about what's been going on there and the work there. So before I get going on a history, I'm just going to let Shawn, you just want to introduce yourself and just give them a little bit of history about you?
Hey everyone, my name is Shawn Hosier. I'm a detective with the High Point Police Department in our Special Victims Unit. I've been in law enforcement almost 25 years. Primarily, I've been in investigations. Investigated homicides, robberies. I've done federal task force work, and I've ended up back into special victims when we split our violent crime unit into 2 separate entities. And so the past 5 years or so, I have been back in special victims, and then we brought over into the Family Justice Center in High Point once it opened over here, and that's where we've been working out of ever since.
All right, thanks, Shawn. Lori, can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Lori Wickline. I'm a prosecutor here at the Guilford County DA's office. I work out of the High Point office. I've been a prosecutor for almost 16 years. I spent 13 years at the Alamance County DA's office, and I've been here in High Point for almost 3 years. My work is mainly special victims, child abuse, elder abuse, adult sexual abuse, domestic violence, murder cases. But I also get a smattering of other cases as well. But my specialty is special victims crimes. When I was in Alamance, I started work in elder abuse, and it kind of took off from there, and have continued that work here in Guilford County.
All right, thanks, Lori. Diane.
Hello, I'm Diane Hayden. I am a program manager for Guilford County Department of Health and Human Services, Department of Social Services. Work specifically with aging and adult services. Currently working with more preventative type services, rep payee and home aid, any kind of home and community support service. Background, obviously, for about 15 years, I've been working for DSS, previously in Stokes County and then now in Guilford. Social work background, started as an APS worker, did that for many years, and then supervision and now management of some of those programs.
All right. Thanks, Diane.
Thank you.
So we'll get into, I kind of want to let the experts and everyone that's doing the work definitely tell you about their experience with our MDT. But first, I just wanted to give a history of Guilford County's MDT and talk about how it came to be and where we've been and where we're going. Back in 2010, out of the Department of Health and Human Services locally here, DSS created a multidisciplinary team. It was the Guilford Adult Interdisciplinary Network, known as GAIN. And so they started meeting. And so that was, and we think 2010, that was before multidisciplinary teams really even got to where they are today and popular. With that, it kind of ebbed and flowed. And then in 2013, when we started talking about getting a family justice center in our area, the Guilford County Family Justice Center really wanted elder abuse to be a priority in the very beginning. So along with domestic violence, child abuse, sexual assault, elder abuse was high up there and right there with them. And so the Guilford County Family Justice Center kind of went as an umbrella, and GAIN kind of morphed into the Elder Justice Committee, and that's where it all began. And we started, meeting as a multidisciplinary team then. It started off as our mission is really to let the community know about just resources, education, and response. We want to improve our response to elder abuse. And so through that, in the beginning, the focus had been on what does the community really need? What do they want? And so we started kind of looking as a team of what do we need to get out there and start teaching. So education and outreach has historically been, over the past few years, what our multidisciplinary team has focused on, and it's gone well. I think we've been very successful in that. Friends Against Fraud originated out of that. And so we did we pulled 911 calls and started to look at what are older adults really calling 911 about, what are they interested in? And the number one thing was fraud and scams. And so as a multidisciplinary team, we took all of our information that we were going and sharing individually out into the community, and we combined it into one training. So we would go out and it would be law enforcement, adult protective services, ombudsman, private elder law attorney, whoever was available at that time, we would go out and share this information together as a group. And we really were able to make our way around Greensboro. We had started to in High Point as well before COVID hit. But that seemed to be, that preventative measure just seemed to work really well. And it was something I think that really ignited, we started to see, the fruit of that. We then were looking at what other training could we do. And so our team started to focus on vital signs, which is responding to sexual assault in long-term care facilities, and kind of got that training under wraps and started to get that out to the community, and that was successful as well. And then when COVID hit, I think it kind of made us look at things a little bit differently. We couldn't get out there, especially within the population that we were used to being face-to-face with and serving. And so our team kind of talked about what do we want to do now? What do we want to focus on now? And so although we plan to continue our outreach in the community, we have now kind of shifted gears, and we're wanting to focus on increasing prosecution of elder abuse crimes. And so that's kind of where we're at today, and why the panelists that are sitting on this panel today are here. I think that they're all very committed to that goal. I also want to talk about just how I came to get here. So our team kind of sat around and they dreamed a dream and they made it happen. And they wrote a grant, and then poof, I'm here. And I think that that's been important. I think that, having one person, it truly can be a full-time job to coordinate an MDT. I mean, you have a lot of different players. Anyone that knows that's working within this work in law enforcement, people are constantly getting promoted. They're moving to different areas. The same can be with APS and prosecution and just different things. People are always going different directions. And so sometimes you think like, oh, we're moving, we're flowing right now. And then somebody gets promoted and you feel like you've lost all of that in one area. So it's constantly chucking at it. Let's see. So I also—
Could you talk a little bit about the grant process and where that grant funding came from and the application process and what that looked like? Are you solely dedicated to this project to elder justice needs in Guilford County? Yes.
Yes, I am. So I'm solely, dedicated to that. I'm out of the Family Justice Center. So the grant lies under the Guilford County Family Justice Center. So I technically work for the county, but it's VOCA funded. And I know that Talitha yesterday, I believe it was yesterday during the beginning, or I guess it was Monday now, spoke about the VOCA funding. So, and she said that is out there, and so it's a wonderful grant. I think that it's flexible. It's really allowed me, I've been able to put 100% into it. And then operating under a family justice center, I think is helpful in itself because the framework is there and it exists. It's just kind of getting it, bigger into the community. We also, speaking of grants, it hasn't ended there. We've also seen that although I have been here, I don't have the flexibility to go into work with individuals in their homes. And I've noticed that to be a large need. I think we all have. We've seen that maybe we can't take a case to prosecution and maybe it's screened out of APS and maybe at the time the law enforcement's finished with the case and the individual still needs services. And we've seen that as such a gap. There just doesn't seem to be like a care manager for this population when it starts to fall out of those realms. And so we have also written another grant for a care manager that can work in more long-term care for victims of crime and kind of help them pick back up the pieces. And we have currently submitted for that grant. We're hoping to hear back soon, and we're really hopeful that we're going to get that. And so I think it's just continuing to get together with your team and talking about what do we need. We can't constantly rely on one entity. I think a lot of times we say, like, why can't Adult Protective Services do it? They need to do it. But it's not, Adult Protective Services can't do everything. And so we have to be creative as a community, and we have to fill in those gaps. And I think that Guilford County has done a great job of that. And just getting ready to start with kind of talking to the panelists and the folks that are here from our MDT. I think that the most important thing about a multidisciplinary team is relationships and its passion. I think you really need someone that is going to volunteer to be a part of that team and not voluntold, because I think that this work is passion driven. And everyone on this call today from our team, they're so passionate about what they do. And I think that's where that success lies. It's able to pick up the phone and be comfortable calling someone. If you don't feel comfortable picking up the phone and talking to someone, it's really hard to, talk cases with them and to ask for assistance with cases. So I think relationships are so important. And then at the end of the day, even if we are not able to prosecute a crime or not able to get to where we were, I think that we all have that goal in mind. How do we still meet the client's needs? And so I know Shawn's great about saying, hey, do you have resources for this? Here's this police report that I had, and this family is looking for, other types of assistance. So being able to lean into each other like that and just provide resources to, the families that we serve. All right, so I want you guys to be able to hear from our panelists. So I'm going to start with Lori, and I know she spoke a little bit about, that she came from Alamance County prior to coming into High Point. So Lori, can you tell us about just your experience and with MDT work and why it's important to you as a prosecutor?
Yes, so back in 2013, we sort of started a grassroots movement in Alamance County for elder abuse. We saw a need there in the county, and that elder abuse, vulnerable adult cases were not really being prosecuted. Personally, I saw, or I realized that I was lacking in that area and didn't really know what I was doing and needed more education and more training in that area. And so the Conference of DAs put on a training. Paul Greenwood came and presented at that training. And then I went back to my elected DA at the time, and it just kind of took off from there. And so we started going out into the community, doing that community education that Heather was just talking about. And then sometime around 2015 or 2016, through the Family Justice Center in Alamance County, they got a grant through the Office of Violence Against Women. And we were able to get a grant that was for 3 years. And we did sort of had like a train the trainers, where we went and we were committed to training 150 law enforcement officers within the county. I was on that training team at the time. We trained approximately 150 officers in the county, and our numbers skyrocketed. The reports that were coming in, the training that the officers had, from the patrol level all the way through to the detectives, they were so much better equipped to handle the reports that were coming in from the community education that we were doing. It was just this well-rounded machine that was really working. We had a memorandum of understanding among the agencies, Department of Social Services, the law enforcement agencies in the county, the district attorney's office. And so it was this really well-working machine that we had. So then when I came to Guilford County in 2019, I was really excited to learn about the Elder Justice Committee, that they already had a good base, a good framework for working with the vulnerable adults, the older adults in the community. They were already doing that community education piece. And it's really important as a prosecutor to have that, because it takes a village to work these cases. You can't work these cases in an individual vacuum, and you can't do this work alone as a prosecutor, because and as I'll speak to in a little bit, you need those resources to make these cases and to help these older adults. And I'll get to that in just a little bit and speak more to that.
Awesome. Thanks, Lori. I know Lori was just talking about, having training for officers. And I know that that's something that we are really working on now. And we've recognized that, especially with patrol going out and recognizing, what are signs of a crime, and not something that's just typical. Someone has just aged at home and now they've just naturally passed away, but actually looking for those signs. Is this actually caregiver neglect? What was going on? So, Shawn, I know that recently, within the past few months, that you had a case that came through, and we talked about it when it came in. And even though it may not have ended exactly where we wanted to end it to, I think that it's a good example of a really good investigative work. So, can you give us a little example about that recent case?
Absolutely. And just to kind of hit back on the team part of this, I was with Daryl Griffin when GAIN first started back in 2010. I went to the conference with him in Florida when that started, went through all that training, was 100% on board with it, and then I got moved. So that, like you were saying, that happens. I mean, I went through training and was very looking forward to getting that initiative going. And then I went to another assignment, and when I moved, nobody else picked it up. So when I came back into this world of special victims, which includes elder abuse, I went right back into it. It's the initiatives were there, everything was there, still in place. The case that we're talking about happened in October of last year. This day, it is mid-October. My supervisor asked me to review reports. I'm reading a report, elder abuse is there, and I read it. And it was reported on the 19th, and I'm reviewing it on the 20th. So there's a little bit of a delay in when it was actually reviewed by us for assignment. I read the report and immediately I'm like, this is not good. Just reading the words that the officers wrote about the condition of Mr. Marshall in the house and how the physical therapist found him on the floor of the house and the condition, and it just screamed bad news. Then I reviewed the pictures of Mr. Marshall that our lab took of him at the hospital. Our patrol did enough initiative to call our lab to document some things at the house, took pictures of him at the hospital. So I reviewed those images and open sores were present on his body. And Mr. Marshall was 93, 94 years old at the time. He actually had a close connection with the police department because he was one of our crossing guards for the school. So I knew of him, didn't know him personally, but I knew what he did for us. And he was also a veteran as well. So after reviewing the report pictures, I immediately called Lori. I was like, and we game plan. I was like, this is what I'm thinking based off everything that's in the report, the pictures, the condition. He's still admitted in the hospital. APS was notified. I said, I'm going to do a search warrant on the house for evidence. And she was 100% on board with it. So, typed up a search warrant, got it signed by the magistrates, rallied up a team together. We went to the house, knocked on the door. Family was there, told them we were there to execute a search warrant. They cleared the premises. Everybody left the house. And we began processing that for evidence. And it was immediately visible to us that the house was, well, it was not the worst house I've ever been in. It still reeked of urine, feces, stains on the carpet. His bedroom was a mess, pee pads on the floor. The bedding had been removed, taken to a laundry room, stacked up to be washed. We seized a bunch of evidence out of the house, including the linens, took a ton of photographs. I included on the search warrant any financial records related to Mr. Marshall and his financial well-being. So boxes of paperwork were taken out of that house. Once that part was done, the very next day, Heather and I speak about what's going on. I get her on board with the case and what's going on. I contact our APS rep that we have for High Point. Her name is Sheffy Arias. She's great to work with. We communicated often. She and I arranged to go to the hospital to meet Mr. Marshall. And of course, this is in the middle of the pandemic. So you're kind of like, I'm going into a hospital, masked up, gowned up, whatever they had to do, but we needed to check on his condition. So we went to our local hospital here, tried to speak to Mr. Marshall, but he had severe cognitive issues, Alzheimer's, knew his first name, could not talk about anything else other than his first name, couldn't give you date, time, anything like that. Sheffy immediately, of course, notified her supervisors what was going on, had him placed at a care facility once he was medically cleared from the hospital. Unfortunately, because he had injuries to his body, but those injuries had occurred at another home, not a home facility, but another adult care facility, which the injuries that were documented in our police photographs were of a healing nature, but because of his condition physically and mentally, he could only drink so much liquid food a day. He could not tolerate solid food, so he was on a very strict-based diet, which did not give his body enough nutrients to heal like our normal bodies would because of our being able to ingest and take nutrition in at a good level. So that was one reason we found out why he was not healing well. But ultimately, he was placed into another adult care facility. He did pass away of natural causes, nothing related to what we found with him. And along these steps of the way, I'm speaking with Lori about what I'm finding, what we're presenting, what he is presenting. Speak to Heather. I speak to Sheffy. I review all these financial records, bank statements from years and years and years. power of attorney was in place within the family. That was all in place. And ultimately, we could not charge this case. We couldn't charge any exploitation of him financially, nor could we tie any of the injuries back to his caregivers, including his granddaughter and his actual daughter. It was not the outcome I was hoping I could prove, but the evidence was just not there. But in talking to all of the partners involved in this case, from Lori to Sheffy to Heather, we all wanted to do the best that we could for Mr. Marshall. And we did the best we could, but it just was not the outcome that we wanted. So that was a really tough case. It was a good 6 months of investigation that we went through to try to prove things, but ultimately it was not a prosecutable case with the outcome. But it did prove that we do have a solid team here. Everybody's just a phone call away. If I needed something, I could call somebody, get an answer, or get a referral to another agency if need be. And that's what this team's about. I mean, the adult version of this MDT that we're on is like the juvenile sexual assault MDT that I'm a part of, that Lori's a part of as well. They run simultaneously, hand in hand. So anybody out there that has a juvenile sexual assault, child abuse team, you can implement the adult version and have an MDT for that. It's similar but different, but it's very along the same tracks. So it's not too hard to get that going.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Shawn, Detective Hosier, that you can definitely replicate that. And I know we're really trying hard to do that here in Guilford County as far as where we're headed in the direction of case review and trying to improve prosecution. So I think that's a really great point to bring up. While we had kind of started to think about improving prosecution and going in that direction, I know that Diane Hayden with Department of Health and Human Services, she attended the MDT workshop at the North Carolina School of Government that we had. I guess it's been 2019 now, Meredith. It's already been like almost close to 2 years. And so that's when she first started to get involved. And so Diane, can you tell us about just why after attending that workshop, like you kind of came on board and have stayed on board? And then I think just leaning into thinking about how, Shawn talked about getting that report, why High Point is starting to now get some reports and how you really contributed to that, starting as like a program manager and getting that going. So can you shed some light on that for us?
Sure. So I love this population and I'm going to serve them either by myself or on a team, but I recognize you can do so much more with a team of people that have the same goals and passion. One of the things I recognize working at DSS is we have so many limitations. When you're working with protective services, it's a very narrow group of people that you're actually able to assist. Where law enforcement and the legal system look at a much broader focus of individuals. So you always are kind of left off of what happens to the other group of people, what happens to those that fall in the cracks. So being a part of the MDT helps keep me aligned and aware of what happens outside of those that we serve individually, and also what resources are out there for people. DSS offices offer different services depending on what county you're in. And so you might be limited to what knowledge you have about what's available for this population. But when you open up to an MDT, you have everybody around the table. You have community partners, you have your law enforcement, your DA, and it really makes you a stronger social worker and better able to serve the population if you're involved in something like this. You learn about small little programs or little funding that might help this one person you're working with. And then it also gives you a person to call and connect with to link that person you're working with to a resource or an organization that can make a huge difference in their life. So it's really helps you understand that you're not here just to do protective services, but really to help guide people to resources and education, even if you're not the one providing it. And also the prevention of protective service needs. you can get stuck in APS brain and everything's about, the next case that's coming in and how long you have to get out there and check on this person. You can kind of lose focus of the bigger picture. And so being on an MDT helps you look at prevention and trying to help lessen the work that comes your way by educating the community, by helping people be aware who to call, how quickly to call, when to call. And so it really helps you out on your workload, as well as giving you a way to help people be in a better position and be more effective at dealing with it within their own families or within their own, social groups. It's also a great way to check your effectiveness. As like Shawn said, calling Steffi, I was elated to hear, that we pick up and we're responsive. But if you ever, you need that feedback, you need to know you're doing the right things. You need to know that your social work teams are working effectively with law enforcement, with the DA, with your family justice centers, with your community partners. And if you're at the MDT, you hear that feedback, good or bad. And when it's bad, they usually come with a solution or a suggestion of what they need so that you can meet that and be more effective to the group and to the community. As far as, the MDT in particular, that MDT workshop that we all attended is kind of where I heard Miss Wickline actually say something to someone else. We were just sitting around the table and she was talking to a law enforcement officer and said, in this particular jurisdiction, I've not gotten any recommendations to prosecute. I don't know why I'm not getting them. And I was the new to the group and just kind of listening to what she was saying and trying to get oriented to who was around the table. Totally new, had never met anybody around the table pretty much. And I was just listening. And simultaneously at the same time, I was in a class for lien management, which is a totally different, unrelated topic. But, she had mentioned that she'd not gotten those. She'd been in that position almost a year or right at a year, and just was curious as to why she was getting them for some jurisdictions and not others. And normally that you wouldn't think that would involve DSS in any way. But as part of my certification for lien facilitation, I had to do like a Kaizen group, which is a continuous improvement group. And so I chose that statement of Ms. Wickline to investigate or analyze why she was not getting those reports from the detectives in that one jurisdiction. So basically, just a background of what lien or Kaizen is, it's a continuous improvement process. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of looking at business decisions, analyzing your effectiveness, discussing solutions to problems, identifying waste in the work that you do, whether it be bottlenecking. You have 10 people doing one job, reporting, sending all their information to one person doing the next step of the function, and looking at those types of things. And really breaking down every part of a process to look at where you can improve, where you can change the order of transportation of information, that type of learning. And so it's basically management type things. Doesn't seem like it's going to match, so much with government processes or even specifically protective service systems. But what I decided to do was take that topic, bring together a group of APS staff, law enforcement staff. We had the ombudsman there for a client perspective, because again, in that thinking, it's really looking at waste that takes away from the value of your customer or your client. And so we were trying to look at our processes in general, not a specific case, but overall, what do we do to communicate with one another? And in protective services, you have the initial notice to law enforcement, which is kind of like our first step to notify law enforcement that we have a situation that we think may have a legal situation, something that needs to be investigated. And then they receive that, review it to see if it meets their criteria, and then move on to an investigation, which may end up at the DA's office. So in general, that's the basic principle. And in that review or in that team, the first thing that they identified was DSS is sending them, to a fax number to somebody who retired 2 years ago. And it was something simple, like a communication of who's doing what job and who's receiving it on the other end. But because we didn't have those relationships that Heather was talking about being so important in this work, we didn't realize we weren't sending them to someone who was receiving and reviewing. So it was a simple fix. Throughout that entire process, we also came up with 14 different ideas to turn into the Elder Justice Committee as possible waste issues within our protective service system within Guilford. So the takeaway, I think, is really looking at innovative and effective ways to communicate clearly within your MDT, making sure that you have a strong communication system, whatever it may be that suits the people around the table, and also an effective way to look at what the waste is that's focused, because you can go down rabbit holes. Each agency has their own rabbit holes, a way to identify barriers or places that you don't match in policy, and then also a way to organize all of those solutions that you're going to come up with around the table into the ones that are really effective and important in the moment, and which ones need to be set to the side to be able to be looked at later, but not forgotten. So that's kind of all that stemmed from hearing Lori say one thing around the table and having other tools outside of what I was used to working with to bring to the table. And it was extremely effective, especially in building relationships. No one in our Kaizen team, which is, it just means change for the good. That's what Kaizen means. It was, nobody had ever met one another. And that kind of blew my mind because we all do the same work, but it's a big county. Like you said, there's 2 cities, so you could be on either staff. There's a lot of change. Just putting the group around the table, they were throwing out ideas and problems within minutes of meeting one another. And even after the event, they kept calling one another, suggesting changes, and they got really good at asking for what they need from the other team members.
Awesome. Thanks, Diane. I know, yeah, I'm over in High Point sometimes. And so I know that they've started to see an influx in elder abuse cases since Diane did that. And so now I think it's, we still are working on getting patrol to recognize certain things so that they can make their way to detectives like Shawn, who can then get things going to Lori, who we know if Lori gets them, like she's going to take it all the way. I mean, she's going to cross the finish line. It's definitely just getting them to her. And so that's something I think that I can say that we have struggled with. Like I said, we started kind of really strong around that education and outreach, but we're still, in the mix and in the storm of getting it to where we need to. Lori, what would you say, I guess, is the biggest barrier to prosecuting these types of cases?
I think it's the training. I think it's just that I think patrol officers or EMS workers or fire workers, they just don't know what they're seeing, and that you can have these co-occurring abuses, meaning you can have the financial exploitation going on with the domestic violence. And you also have the training issues with prosecutors. They see it when they have a victim comes by and just say, well, I don't want to prosecute. And then they have offices that just say, okay, and then they don't prosecute when you really need to have these no drop policies. And that what the elder person really wants is, it's not that they don't necessarily want to prosecute, is they just want the abuse to stop. And so there are ways to work around that, and you need to come up with creative solutions. I appreciate what you said in that, and I take it and kind of take it across the finish line, and I do, but it's maybe not always a conviction, or it's maybe not a conviction that leads to prison, because my job is to seek justice, and justice looks very different in every single case. Now, and I take into consideration what the elder adult wants. If that older adult is even able to communicate what he or she wants. But otherwise, I have to look to outside collateral sources for that as well. So I think training, and I am a huge proponent of training, and that's one of the things that I have tried to work on, working with outside agencies, working with the Conference of District Attorneys, working with the School of Government, working with the Division of Aging, of really training officers and first responders across the state of what to look for and to recognize, to see. And so I think that's probably the biggest barrier to prosecution. Also, and seeing it in individual district attorney's offices, training there, not knowing what to look for, not knowing how to prosecute. And I think that the Conference of DAs is really doing a good job now, along with the School of Government, of really getting it out there. So there's no excuse anymore. The training is out there for prosecutors to find it, and you got to have that passion to go forward with it.
Absolutely. And I agree. And I think we do see that here, and we are working on it. And I know we have a goal this year of having some great training come into our community, Paul Greenwood, and try to really get some training for patrol officers. I had a case come through a couple months ago in the Family Justice Center where an older adult was being abused by her roommate / caregiver. And I actually, this was a Greensboro case, and I actually called patrol to come and take this report of what we believe was financial exploitation going on. And I think he was so nice, just a lack of training, and he just didn't see the crime, and there was not evidence, and he just really wasn't comfortable taking the report. But I think the power of having a multidisciplinary team was I was able to go speak with one of our family victim unit detectives and say, like, this report needs to be taken. I really think that, there's something going on here. And, because of the kind of advocating and having the team come together and saying, what do we need to do? There was a civil attorney involved, and he was kind of trying to get involved as much as he could too, and not recognizing that it was a criminal matter yet. And just like Lori was saying, it's not always about getting the case to prosecution. We were able to get the caregiver removed from the house. We were able to get felony charges in place. And unfortunately, this client passed away, but she got to live her last few weeks free of abuse. And so sometimes I think that is what it's about, is just having that team come together to do what they can. And speaking of just training, Detective Hosier, can you talk about what advice you would give to just other patrol officers or law enforcement that's listening right now, wondering how can they train their patrol officers?
The biggest thing that I've always said over the years is if you don't try, you're not going to succeed. I mean, you go to your training coordinator within your law enforcement agency and you bring this topic up, and maybe they're not receptive. Well, keep bringing it up. I know here we train a lot. We have a lot of different training cycles. There's always a need to get different topics in front of our officers. So we have a set schedule for our training. We recommend you be proactive and go out and find your own trainings. Anything online you want to do on your own, our training division pushes that. And that's something that we've always done over the years, is try to get that out. And I've addressed officers on an individual level when it comes to reports. If you're not comfortable with it, then get the training part of that done, so you don't shy away from it. Because sometimes the elder abuse and the child sexual assault, nobody wants to do those, because it's like those are hard to deal with. I'm like, well, somebody has to do it. I can't be there 24/7. So somebody on patrol, they'll get a report done, but the more training they have, the more comfortable they are in that environment and dealing with these situations that can come up. And just doing this little bit of training today takes me back to Mr. Marshall's case. The Guilford County EMS guys that showed up that day to the medical call that the physical therapist called in, they made a point to take him to the hospital. They went against the caregiver's request about keeping him at home, they were like, no, he's going to the hospital. So they recognized, even within their environment, that he's not in a good place medically. And so that was very beneficial to get him away from that family ultimately, and to let him have some peace at the end. But biggest thing, always train, try to find training. Try to get into your coordinators, however your agency runs training, and try to get into it. And the good thing now is a lot of these trainings are online, free or at low cost. And I know for us, if we do an online training, then that counts as work hours. So, I mean, that's good for our agency that we can do that. We do that for our guys and gals that work for us. So just always try to find that extra time to go that extra mile to get better at something that maybe you're not comfortable with, because it'll be beneficial in the long run.
And I know we've talked about training patrol a lot today, but I think it's important to also know that we're talking about all frontline. And I know when Lori was doing training in Alamance County, it's important that, you are training EMS, fire, patrol, that you have local bankers involved, financial professionals at your table, really ER nurses. And I know we're trying to do a better job of that, as well as just trying to get as many players as we can at the table, because it does stem beyond, just the three of us four of us sitting here today. Diane, just in the social work world and adult protective services, what advice would you give to social workers on just the importance of collaboration?
Don't give up and keep trying. Learn as much about your audience as you can. Have conversations with law enforcement. You'll learn their lingo. Social workers are supposed to be great listeners and have great listening skills. Treat those coworkers or those co-collaborators as your customer, and hear them. Listen to what they need. A lot of times we're in the process in the early beginning, and then 30 to 45 days, we're kind of out of the picture, and we may not know or see what happens behind the scenes with the other agencies. So ask for follow-up so that you can see how you can impact in the beginning what they're working with in the middle and the end of the case. There might be things you can see. If you know what a law enforcement officer looks for, you can look for it too. You would know them better when to call them. If you know things, the way documentation needs to happen for a DA to prosecute more effectively, then document that way. Have those conversations, learn from them, ask them how we can serve them better so that our adult population gets the benefit. Share the burden. A lot of social workers, there's a lot of burnout. You feel like you're kind of in there by yourself, and you don't have to. There's a lot of people and a lot of organizations that are doing and think the same way we do about protecting our seniors and our disabled adults. Collaborate with them so that you don't feel the burden on your own shoulders. And it's helpful because the work actually gets easier when you start opening your eyes to different ways of doing things and being willing to take advice from others that have done similar types of work. And I think the clients, the adults that we serve, they deserve it. They deserve us to give that much attention and time to invest in our own work skills and learn better ways of addressing the issues that they're facing.
And I think, Diane, you bring up a good point of just, it's almost like cross training. And I think that we can do that well in a multidisciplinary team. Being able to get together once a month, like we truly get to learn. I mean, I'll know we're not going to learn exactly what each other's jobs are, but we're able to better understand what we can do and what we cannot do, which can really help with frustration in the end. I mean, it's very easy to say, why didn't the detective make the charge? Why didn't APS do this? you know, why didn't the case make it where it is? And so I think when you're able to have that space where you can sit down and you can talk and you can understand the why things didn't or did happen, and then you can figure out, how do we do it better, or how do we go around an agency that it's not able to serve in the role that we thought that they could. And so I think that that's an important part, cross training that can come out of multidisciplinary teams. Lori, I know that when we were when we got together to just chat for a few seconds, making sure logistic wise things are going, Lori mentioned that next week she has a big trial coming up. I think it's a homicide trial, right, Lori? And so just thinking about how that's coming up, and it's probably taking all of her time, and just how do you have the time to devote to this work and elder abuse and our MDT with all of that going on? Because a lot of people, we all have a lot going on, I know, but just thinking about, how do you make time for that?
You just have to make time. It's just about priorities. And you're right, I do have a murder trial next week, actually, with Detective Hosier. And we're both involved in that. And I don't know how to say it any other way other than this is just important work. Like Diane was saying, it's just it's just important work. Like the work is if you work with children. And so my advice to the prosecutors that may be watching, or law enforcement that may be watching, is that, you know, you don't look at children's cases when they don't look at you and say, I don't want to prosecute this. And they don't come to you and look at you. They just want the abuse to stop, and you do everything you can for them. And so our older population and our vulnerable adult population, they deserve the same respect and they deserve the same time. And you just have to make the time, because they just deserve it. So I just carve out time and I work on the murder case at other times. So I just planned around it, and I just planned accordingly, and I wanted to be here because it was really important.
And I think that's important to remember, is that I think at the elder abuse and the land, I'm sure that a lot of you here today, and if you work in the land of elder abuse, sometimes seems that it's pushed to the side or comes behind of a lot of other things going on and a lot of other types of abuse. So I think it is saying, like, this is a priority, and making it a priority, because they do deserve it, the older population. Lori, I also wanted to ask, I know that you brought a case to the MDT back, I believe it was last summer, and just wanted to see if you could talk about how that was helpful to you at all. It was a fraud case.
Yeah, so just quick background facts. And speaking of a case that didn't want to be prosecuted, it was a financial exploitation. This man had basically endeared himself to this woman, doing odd jobs around the house for her. He lived right across the street. He ended up becoming her power of attorney, paying her bills, and he exploited her for roughly $400,000. And but she didn't understand that. I mean, she didn't know how much money he was taking. She thought that he was just paying her bills. And when the detective went, and this was over a course of several years, and when the detective went to talk to her about, well, he's bought this brand new truck, he's bought a Harley Davidson with your money, she's like, no, he hasn't done that. And we knew that when he was arrested, that this would really send her over the edge. And that she was going to need a lot of support, and she was going to need a lot of victim services. And so we didn't want to just leave her out there. So I reached out to Heather, knowing she was the director of our Elder Justice Services, because one of the things I am not always great at, and I readily admit, is what all services are out there. And I am just not great at that. I know there are a lot of services out there, but so I'll leave that up to the other people to know that. So that's the other part of having a team. And so I called the people that do know what services are out there. And so I called Heather and I'm like, Heather, we're going to need a support person. What can you do? What can we do? I'm at a loss. And Heather got on the phone with Diane and got Diane involved. And they then immediately got up with the detective and put support people in place. And Diane maybe even went out to the scene the day of the arrest, and because we knew this woman would literally maybe go into shock at seeing him being arrested, because we needed to put support services in place. And we finally got her and got her place, because we knew she couldn't take care of herself and we couldn't just leave her. And so that's really a great example of the MDT working together and planning around the takedown, so to speak, the execution of the search warrant and the arrest warrant, and battling that, or comparing that with the needs of the client, to make sure that she was taken care of at the same time.
Yeah, and I know that since that case, I believe that was like last June or July, we talked about it. The fraud detective on that case, like stemming from him, it was the first time Lori was like, oh, this is the MDT. He was able to bring the case and talk about what was going on and what he thought. He was concerned for her too. He knew that he had enough to make the charge and that was going to happen. But from law enforcement, he was like, I am so worried about her and what's going to happen after, we arrest him. And he has stayed involved from that time with our multidisciplinary team. So I think even like learning, you bring a case and you start to get all this support from all these different people, it can help with case after case, and you learn what an asset that is. He's now actually being given all of the elder financial exploitation cases in High Point so he can focus on elder related cases, which is really nice. And the same has happened here recently in Greensboro. We're starting to get all of the one fraud detective is starting to get all of the elder exploitation cases, and he's now involved with our MDT too, which it makes it so much easier. I think that oftentimes these victims are crossing paths with so many different agencies and professionals. And, when you realize that, when you're all connected, it truly makes the service easier for them. All right, Meredith, I guess we can.
We're coming up. We've got about 5 minutes left. I just want to give an opportunity for anybody out there who has questions to jump in. The chat box has been a little quiet, but I think everybody's just been really tuned in. You guys had some great comments, so thank you for that. And perhaps maybe we could just go around if you have sort of one point of advice for a team that's looking to form or trying to get this work off the ground, sort of your elevator speech for why it matters and what you'd tell them.
Yeah, sure. I would just say, if I have one piece of advice, it truly is like, if you can pinpoint a person to kind of get those meetings going, be consistent with those meetings, check to make sure that the times work. We recently adjusted our time from a noon meeting to a 2:30 meeting. It was able to allow more court professionals to come. Lori's been able to be involved more. So I think, truly checking around what's good for everyone's schedule can get more people at the table. When we did meet in person, we would offer lunch, and food gets people there. So if you can either raise money or fundraise, if you provide lunch, people are coming to your meeting. And so we have always, prior to COVID, when we met in person, we provided lunch every single time. And so I think that's a big, a great way to get people there. And then again, just like truly nurturing those relationships. Relationships are hard. They're hard in any point of your life, and they take work, whether it's personal or professional. And so I think truly nurturing those is what can help your MDT become successful.
Any others want to jump in with last thoughts, or I know we have a couple.
Just piggyback off that real quick. If you are part of the MDT, we've kind of hit on it. You're going to have the moments where you don't agree, and it's okay to disagree. It's okay to have an argument, talk about the differences, why you see it your way, while the other person sees it. It's okay. It's healthy. It's supposed to be that way. So just know there's going to be great MDTs, and there's going to be times where you're going to have your up and downs. So just work through it, and you'll be there for each other.
I think we've got about 2 minutes left. Diane or Lori, want to jump in with the last thought?
I just would say, if you're a prosecutor out there watching, or if you're trying to get a prosecutor on board, go to somebody that you know that's got a lot of passion for the work. And if you're just starting out, be humble. Remember, you don't know everything. And like Diane, piggybacking off what she was saying, there are people out there that know more than you do about some things, and be willing to learn. That you don't know everything, and I didn't know everything, and I still don't know everything, and I am still learning, and I learn something new every day. And it is hard work, but it is rewarding work, and it will just make you feel infinitely better about your life when you can go and help these people. You will feel so great. So.
This is Pam. I hate to interrupt. This has been a great, very interesting presentation. We have about 43 seconds left, so we can sit right here and they will bring us back. So if you just want to, but again, thank you all so much for doing this and taking a time of your busy schedules.
Thank y'all. Appreciate it. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.